Well, hello again and welcome in. Wherever you are today and wherever you're listening from, I'm so happy to have you over to feast upon God's Word together. Get your plate ready today and take a seat. It's the 44, which is Matthew 4:4. Man cannot live on bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. Let's eat. I'm still your host, Jed Yancey. And as I said last week, we've never done this before together on the 44 is take on three parts to a subject or a topic. I hope you're not getting sick of it. But honestly, when it comes to what we're talking about or have been talking about, we could likely go for more. I know that you probably know that's the case, but you probably also know how I like to change it up a little bit and eat on something else. And it's good to do that. So that's coming next week is we're going to talk some about the Tennessee walking horse next week. But as far as today and finishing our three-part focus on unity and oneness and being one with other ones, we've talked at great lengths about being the kind of people that keep the oneness and unity that God desired by not cutting corners, by putting some chains on our whining and complaining, most especially over the very small things that can lead to divide. We talked last week about selfish ambition and selfish desires and how that can lead us to places of divide and division. And then finished last week by talking about trashing the leadership or trashing the coaches and how bad that hurts and affects any effort to maintain unity and oneness. And so it all comes down to this here this week. And so you might be asking, okay, what else could possibly be left to talk about? Well, let's start here, which I think is super important, and that is with you. Many years ago, when I was in high school and playing football, as you can only imagine, or maybe you know if you played, there is perhaps nothing more important and also really exciting about playing football than the pregame speech given before the game to set the mood and set the stage for running out under the lights on a Friday night to play a game and play it together as a team and play it as one for an opportunity to have great success and ultimately to win the game. As you likely know, if you watch football, football is a game that whether you're on offense or you're on defense, 11 players are required to play as one in order to reach the desired outcome of each play, running play after play after play. And what the goal is for whatever 11 players are on the field at a time, that they play as one and they play together a lot more than the other team does and do what the coaches taught them to do in order to ultimately win. It's crucial to play together. And if you watch football, you know the game is so full of mistakes. Guys, sometimes they run the wrong route. Sometimes the quarterback gets sacked. Sometimes the running back fumbles the ball. Sometimes the defense misses a tackle. Sometimes the quarterback throws an interception. Sometimes kickers miss field goals. Sometimes someone gets a penalty. Like a lot of bad things happen over the course of your average football game as they run play after play after play. So back to the pregame speech. I've often found it to be so interesting because I've heard a lot of them and gave a lot of them as a former coach, but I've always found it interesting that whatever is said by the coach is that last piece of motivation for each one to be a one that is playing together in a unified effort with all these other ones on the field. It's never a speech that's given in such a way to individualize a certain player. It's never a speech that's given in such a way that where there's a last minute play to be installed or to be talked about. It's always the motivation that, hey, when you guys run out on that field, When you run out of the tunnel, when you get up under the lights, we will do this. We will do that. We will play together. We will fight together and we will win together. But do you know where that we attitude starts? It starts with you. You see, when I was in high school and playing football, our coach would say what he was going to say by way of the speech. And then the last thing that we would do together before we ran out onto the field was to strap up and buckle up and check our equipment. Then we would all grab hands, and the coach would lead us in saying this. He would say, I won't let myself down. And the team would say, I won't let myself down. He would say, I won't let my team down. The team would say, I won't let my team down. It would go on to say, I won't let the man next to me down, and I surely won't let the program down. I hope you hear the common denominator there. I won't let myself down. I won't let my team down. I won't let the man next to me down, and I won't let the program down. Do you hear the common denominator? That while everything we said it together and we said it as we, but the common denominator in everything there is the word I. You see, we really begins with me. It begins with you and him and her. Like unity and all being one with other ones begins with a commitment to not let myself down, to not let my team down, to not let the man next to me down, and ultimately to not let the program or the school in that case down, to represent it well. How amazing that is when we consider our spiritual lives, that the same kind of commitment to oneness and unity should exist. As much as it is about we and should be about we and should be about something bigger than me and myself and I, ultimately true oneness and true unity begins with me and my commitment to myself as a Christian, my commitment to the team, my brothers and sisters in Christ, my commitment to the ones that are next to me at any given time. For many of us, from a spiritual standpoint, that's our families or our spouses or our kids. And then, of course, my commitment to God, to represent Him well from the time I wake up to the time I close my eyes to go to sleep. It's required of us. It's necessary. And it's huge because just like when you consider football, what's on the other side will always be adversity and opposition, trying to break that up, trying to bust it up, get you to fail, get you to fall, get us to divide and to ultimately lose. It reminds me so much what we're talking about today. It reminds me so much of, in my mind, one of the greatest books in all the Bible that's unfortunately overlooked a lot. And that's the story of Nehemiah. It's one of my favorites, if not my favorite. And part of this story so perfectly paints the picture of what we're talking about today. If you don't know the story, to put it in short, once upon a time, there were walls surrounding the city of Jerusalem. But they were destroyed by the Babylonians, and those walls had sat in shambles for years. And so during the time Nehemiah was written, the people were back in Jerusalem. They're rebuilding their lives, and at this point had rebuilt the temple, but the walls were still in shambles. And so Nehemiah hears about this, and from a long way off in Susa, he says, I'm going to do something about it. And so he goes and he rallies the people together to get after it. And in chapter 2 of Nehemiah, in verse 18, we read that after Nehemiah, in pregame coach style, says to the people, man, guys, we got to get after this thing. We've got to come together. We've got to rebuild the walls right now. And they say together in verse 18, let us arise and let us build. You hear that pregame speech? Coach says one thing, the people rise up together to run out of the tunnel and to do this together. And so here's where it gets really cool. is that in chapter 3, it's not just words. I don't have time to go through all of chapter 3, but challenge you to just kind of skim through chapter 3, because all you see in Nehemiah chapter 3 is this beautiful picture of ones being one with other ones. They're together. They're unified in their approach to do and to accomplish a God thing. And while I can't pronounce all the names that are in this chapter, there are three words that we can read there over and over and over and over. Those words, those three words, are next to him. Then next to him was him. Now next to him was this guy. Next to him was that guy. Next to him was them. And next to them was him. The entire chapter unified and together in an effort with a clear commitment to not letting the team down, not letting the man next to them down, and for sure, not letting God down in this effort to rebuild these walls. But you'll never guess what happens next. The adversity, the opposition in the form of some men that didn't really like what was happening with these walls. And here's where I really want us to eat for our 44 today, because what we see in chapter 3, yeah, the commitment to we begins with each individual part, begins with me. But right here in chapter 4, in the face of opposition, look at how this idea of not giving up, the commitment to not letting myself down, commitment to not letting my team down, not letting the man next to me down, not letting the program down. Look at how this shines through. You see, this opposition to these people in chapter 4 is shown in verse 8, where we learn the opposition conspired together. They came up with a game plan to come and to fight against these people and cause this disturbance, cause this division, if you want to call it that, or a lack of unity in getting these walls built and getting it done. But this response is what I want us to see today and eat from. Check out what these people do here in verse 9. The first thing they do is they pray together as one. They pray to God. They rely on God. They go first to the one that can truly give them success. Then in verse 9, we also read, they set up a guard against the opposition day and night together as one in a unified effort. There was just no way and no shot they were going to let the team down. Same kind of thing in verse 13, that Nehemiah stations men in the lowest and most exposed places, the weak points, if you will. And I just see this here as being a situation where it was very specific people and men that were stationed in these places. And their job was to keep watch and to stand guard for the greater good of, listen to this, everybody else. What's more is there's some added info in verse 13. Nehemiah stationed the people in families with their swords and their spears and their bows ready to roll and ready to fight and ready to do whatever it took for the team to have great success. And while we do read that they were a little bit fearful, listen to this coach talk from Nehemiah in verse 14. Do not be afraid of your opposition. Remember the Lord who is great. Remember the Lord who is awesome. That is who you're playing for. That's who you're fighting for. And then he says this, if it comes to fighting, you fight for your brothers. You fight for your sons. You fight for your daughters, your wives, and your houses, no matter what. Don't give in. Don't give up. Fight for you. Fight for the team. Fight for the people closest to you, your family, and fight for God. Do it together and do it as one. It's such a cool story as we see from there that the opposition's plan is frustrated. And so in verse 15, we can read that each one went back to his work, and that from that day on, half the servants carried on the work while half stood guard with spears ready. They're working together. Those who were rebuilding the wall took their load with one hand. They're building the wall, but in the other hand, they're holding a weapon. How cool is that? But the last part that I want us to eat on today is what we see in verse 20, because perhaps the hardest part of staying united and staying together and being one with other ones is knowing that there will be more opposition. There will be more adversity. But even then, though they were separated on the wall, as you read in chapter 3 or can read, that they're all over the place and they're scattered on the wall. Even though we are separated in our daily lives, we aren't all right there with each other on the daily. Nehemiah tells the people, listen, even though that's the case and we're separated in rebuilding this wall to you, even though we're separated in these lives we live at whatever place you're working on the wall, if you hear the sound of the trumpet, you run to that trumpet, not away. You run to it because it is right there that together we will find, verse 20, that our God will fight for us. What an amazing story. I hate even shortchanging it today for the sake of time. But really, for your 44 today, can we just leave the last 3 weeks with this? While there are some things we've talked about the last few weeks that can hinder unity and can kill oneness, like complaining and whining and selfish attitudes, so many of those things will disappear and will cease to exist altogether when we understand this, what team we are on, who we play for, and we commit ourselves to not letting ourselves down, not letting the team down, not letting the ones next to us down, and ultimately not letting God down. Man, there's just something about that name Jesus, about everything he's done, everything God has done for us that should move all of us to come together. It's made possible for us to be unified by him and through him, but it's an everyday decision on our end to truly pursue and to work hard at unity and being one with other ones. I love you guys. Thank you so much, as always, for listening. And until next week, you keep on eating.